everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Daily to Dynasty, your one-stop shop for all things fantasy football. Whether your thing is owning your friends in your fantasy football league or cashing tickets week in and week out with your daily fantasy football, this is going to be the show for you. If you've found this show already, thank you so much for doing so. Please check us out on Twitter. It's our social media of choice. You can follow the show at Daily to Dynasty. You can follow me, Craig Orbanoff, at cgorbs94. You can follow Rich at Coda522. And you can follow John at John Hazlett475. And that's John with an H. If you guys want to be a part of this program, we are doing listener voicemails. You can head on over to anchor.fm/daily to dynasty and leave us a voice message that we will play on a future show, and we will answer your question live on this program. So going to be a lot of fun. We want to hear from you guys. We want to answer your questions and help you get better at fantasy football, right? That's what this show is for. So definitely check that out. Also, while you're there, if you want to, we have the ability to take fan support, right? Financial support. And in exchange, we'll come up with some kind of program for you guys where we'll offer you personalized fantasy football advice should you become a financial supporter of this program. We also have a great new partnership with the Underdog newsletter. So if you love Underdog stories, you'll love our friends at the Underdog newsletter. Every week, they sift through hundreds of articles, videos, and podcast interviews. Then every Tuesday morning, they send out a bite-sized rundown of only the best stories you can find all in one place. So you guys can subscribe to the newsletter at jokermag.com/newsletter and follow them on Twitter at jokermaghq. Again, jokermag.com/newsletter and jokermaghq on Twitter. So guys, that's all of the nitty-gritty upfront stuff for the show. We're going to have a fun program. We'll talk about just this week's NFL updates. Obviously, the biggest news of the week being Cam Newton signing with the New England Patriots. We have a lot of takes in regards to that. And then some general fantasy football advice, specifically on the topic of defenses in fantasy football. I think they get overthought of a lot, and I think they can make a huge impact on your team, and we'll kind of talk about the nuances of that. And our top 3 breakout players for 2020. If you guys watched the show last week, you'll know that, we offer a lot of value, especially in our sleepers. We had a top 5 each. It was 15 different players. This week, we're doing top 3 each. We have 9 different players. So we're offering a lot of value on this program. But guys, let's kind of kick things off and talk about the NFL updates. Preseason games have been reduced to 2 games. The Hall of Fame game has been canceled. The enshrinement ceremony has been canceled. There's no supplemental draft. It's just a crazy time to be in this world, right? With everything going on with COVID-19. We decided to put a poll out on Twitter, a question out, and Rich is really the main person handling our Twitter account. So Rich, why don't you read through some of these responses that we got to the question?
Well, the answers were overwhelmingly that people want to keep it at 2 games from this point going forward. We talk about it all the time amongst ourselves that 4 preseason games, it just seems excessive. And with the Hall of Fame game, sometimes it's 5. By the 4th preseason game, it's dragging on. And everyone wants football to start. I think they're doing it the right way. There's also rumors that they might not have any preseason games or 1 preseason game. I think it's going to start to diminish as it's getting close to the preseason. I think if you have 1 game for vets, 1 game for rookies, that's really all you need. I know that fringe players and, players that are trying to fight for roster spots, I think there's 3 or 4 spots that they say come down to that final preseason game, but I think that number might be, bigger than what it actually is. So on Twitter, we have at JamieKitch8. He said, keep it at 2 games. These guys get blasted enough in training camps and inner squads. If anything, add a game or 2 to the regular season. The amount of abuse these guys take, they should save it for when it counts. Again, I agree 100% with that. And then we have at KLidlow65. There's no question that it should be permanently 2 games. The way 1 game can be for the vets to get warmed up and build chemistry, the other will be for the guys who are trying to make the team. Exactly, what I said as far as, 1 each is really all you need, I think. There's too many serious injuries that happen in the preseason, and then the whole season is lost. Last year you can look at, Avery Williamson from the Jets. He got injured in the preseason for no reason, and then all he could do is post pictures of himself on social media in his Jets uniform on subways and doing other fun stuff. But I mean, he would have been an impact player, for example. So for me, I think 2 games is perfect. I think it should be the new norm. Um, and the Hall of Fame game, sure, that can continue to happen. So if you want to count that as a third week, you can, but that's only 2 games. I mean, 2 teams. So that's what I think. I think 2 is definitely enough.
Yeah, I'm of that mindset as well, Rich. Unless you are a big old football geek who just loves to see who the third string quarterback is going to be, the preseason is kind of hit or miss for football fans alike. John, love to hear from you. What are your kind of thoughts about the preseason, just in general, in regards to players getting hurt, and then this kind of outcome due to COVID-19 of there only being 2 scheduled preseason games?
Well, I think we were going in that direction anyway. I think eventually it was going to end up at 2 games. Particularly, I am that guy that likes to see the third string quarterback play a half or a quarter or something like that. But I think 2 is enough. I do. I think the way it's gone, years ago, starters used to play all 4 games in the preseason, and that kind of, you know, morphed into something different that we know it today. So, to me, I think in this day and age of football, I think 2 is plenty.
Yeah, and I'm 100% with you. I think 2 is where it's at. Also like watching the backups and the backups, fight for their roster spot. But at the end of the day, I think too many people get injured, and it's just not necessarily worth it at the end of the day. We also have in our show rundown here and a little bit of an NFL update that Antonio Brown, right, has been seen working out. He's trying to get a deal with the Seattle Seahawks, and I think the Seahawks have kind of become the Cowboys in a sense, right, where they're the second chance team. That people, it seems to be a place to go in your career when you are in need of a second chance of your NFL career where nowhere else will take you. So just to kind of open the discussion up about Antonio Brown, Rich, we'll start with you. Do you think he can play in the NFL again, and where do you think he ends up?
I absolutely think he can. I just, obviously his mental state has to be number one. He has to be accountable for everything that is going on in his life, and for the past year he hasn't been that guy. But I always say good teams can take chances. You look at the New England Patriots, you look at a team like the Seattle Seahawks. Signing Josh Gordon last year. It did not a ton, but I mean, he's a guy that you had to take that second chance. So, like what you said with the Cowboys and the Seahawks, Antonio Brown would fit in perfectly with the Seahawks. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Antonio Brown. It's hard to find a better trio in the NFL. The Seahawks are in win now mode. They have the team to do it. The Legion of Boom isn't there anymore, but I mean, what they brought in, their defense is very good right now. Russell Wilson's in the prime of his career. For me, I would do it. And, obviously it's a big risk, but if anyone could get through to Antonio Brown, I think it's going to be Russell Wilson. He's the most level-headed guy that you can see. He has very high morals, and, the team flocks to him. So I think if he puts Antonio Brown literally in his pocket, it could definitely work out, and the Seahawks would be one of the favorites for the NFC.
And John, what about you? Do you think Antonio Brown still has a place in this league, and where do you think he ends up if so?
Same as Rich. I think if his mentals are straight, I think do I think that guy could play? Sure. I think when he does suit up and he does play, he's a top 2 or 3 receiver. I think he's shown that time and time again. The Seahawks seem to be the logical choice. He's working out Russell Wilson, as we said. I could see the Ravens. I could see that as a fit too. I mean, we don't think of them as a team that's going to air it out. Although I got a feeling they're going to throw it a little bit more this year than they did last year. And I could see him going there. Another team, in my head and on paper, I can see him fitting in with the Niners.
Mm-hmm.
They're like Rich said, they're a good enough team where they could take a risk. I just don't know if John Lynch and Shanahan want to take a risk like that with a guy to come in and maybe blow up what they've been working on for a few years there. But again, I do think this guy can play in the league, and I think he probably will at some point.
Yeah, I just think he's too talented to not end up back in the NFL. Um, I think he's an incredible player. He has to get his brain back in order, right? He's got to get his mind right. I kind of see, maybe a team like Green Bay as a intriguing possibility, right? They have Devonte Adams. They don't quite have like a quality, top notch, number two receiver, and in this case, I think Antonio Brown would be the number one. But I think he would respect a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. They'd be able to do some really special things on that offense. And I think the Packers are poised to really try and make a run at this thing. New system. Aaron Rodgers, I think, didn't have the best season last season. I think he's looking to get a little revenge, right? And I think that could be an interesting angle. I agree with all the other teams you guys mentioned, but Green Bay is another one on that list. Again, we'd love to hear from you guys. If you guys have an opinion on Antonio Brown and you want to be on our next episode of Daily to Dynasty, you can leave us a message at anchor.fm/Daily to Dynasty. There's a button right at the top of the screen that says message, and you can leave us a voicemail, and we'll play that on our next show. So, guys, let's move on in topics here, and let's talk about the news of the week. Cam Newton signs a one-year contract with the New England Patriots. John, I'll start with you because, one, you're a giant Jets fan, but you were also the biggest Tom Brady hater that I know. So, what are your opinions on his replacement being the former MVP, Cam Newton?
I'm definitely a Tom Brady hater, although I respect his game, obviously. But here's what I'm going to say, and I'm going to contradict what I just said. The Patriots just upgraded at quarterback, and I'm not just talking about over Jarrett Stidham. Brady was just not himself last year. Off season, whatever you want to call it. And I think I think he'll be better in a new location this year than he was last year. I think they just got tired there with him and Belichick and everything that was going on. But Cam's legit. I mean, Cam's good, former MVP, guy's been to a Super Bowl. Add that to Bill Belichick and basically a somewhat ready-made offense. I think the Patriots have a good offensive line. I think they have a formidable backfield, and I think their receivers are improved. I could see Cam coming in there, and to me, I would have picked the Patriots to win the East with Stidham. I'm definitely going to pick them to win the East with Cam. I don't think there's any question.
Yeah, and the thing with Cam Newton, I never felt like he had a top notch team around him in Carolina. Even that year, they went to the Super Bowl. He didn't really have this immense talent surrounding him. They had Greg Olson, Josh Norman on defense. Was really good, and they had some good running backs, but ne- you know. They never really had, I think, just like a strong offensive presence outside of Cam Newton. And I think he's going to be in a situation now where there's a lot of talent around him. It might not be top tier talent, but really quality players who know how to do their job on offense, right? We talked about Sony Michel last week as a breakout candidate, right? We talked about we talked about Julian Edelman, and we'll mention him again a little later on. But there's some really top tier talent, the best coaching in the league at the Patriots. I think this is a really really great signing, and I think with Belichick's coaching, he has a chance to be the MVP again this season. Rich, what are your thoughts about Cam to
I think that it was silly me for thinking that the Bills had a chance to be the winner of this division, even without Cam Newton. I agree with John. This is going to be a runaway again. I think the Bills are a very good team. Let me put it that way. I think the way they built their roster and their coaching is great. But Bill Belichick has a new fancy toy, and I think he's going to have a very fun time with Cam Newton. And I know they didn't name him the starter yet, but everyone knows that he's going to end up the starter. This team just gained so much more speed. There's going to be a lot more opportunities for Julian Edelman to open it up. Julian Edelman and Cam Newton are going to be best friends. Mohamed Sanu and Cam Newton are already working out. He's building chemistry. But if there's one player that I think is going to have the most success based on Cam Newton coming, it's got to be James White. I think the option plays are going to be insane because you don't before you knew Tom Brady wasn't going to run the ball. With Cam Newton back there, it's going to be fun. There's going to be there's going to be a new offense, but it's going to be new exciting plays. Tom Brady obviously is the greatest quarterback of all time. in my book at least. But Cam Newton is a former MVP. I think he's going to win Comeback Player of the Year. He's going to battle for MVP this year. The Patriots are going to win their traditional 10 to 11 games, or how many games they allow based on what's going on. And it's just going to be the Patriots team again. And it just made so much sense for the Patriots to do this. Cam Newton was out there so long, and everyone was wondering why. But the Patriots waited. They got a bargain, and they're going to be the AFC champs again and again and again until someone challenges them, with the Bills being the closest. But now I think it's going to be a runaway.
Yeah, and it is a little bit dependent on Cam Newton's health, right? That's been the question mark for over the last couple of seasons with him. But I just think he's too good to fail. And from a fantasy perspective, I think this is interesting. Now, I don't necessarily think Cam is going to be valued the way he was a few years ago, being like a maybe third or fourth round draft pick, maybe slightly later, when he was in that MVP form, but in my opinion, I think he's a QB2. He's someone you could take pretty late and get a ton of value out of. I think there's safer QB1 options, especially because he's not named the starter yet. But I think all of the receivers in New England just got a ton of value. And, whether it's guys like or Edelman or, anyone else, you mentioned Mohamed Sanu already working together. I just think that all of these guys now have the potential to get that kind of boom home run touchdown that we haven't necessarily seen from New England over the last couple of seasons. Their offense has been nickel and dime you all the way down the field and get into the end zone. I think it's going to look a lot more explosive. But I think all of these receivers are going to have a ton of value. I think the deep ball is going to be such a weapon now in New England, and that it just really hasn't been over the last couple of seasons. So, John, let's kick it to you from a fantasy perspective. What is your opinions on Cam and Patriots offensive players in general?
Well, I think you hit it on the head. I think he's a high quarterback too, but he could definitely be a QB1. It's all going to be based on his health, obviously, and I think the first 4 to 5 weeks, especially with only a couple preseason games, I think it might take him some time to gel a little bit. But I think once he does, I think it's all the players you guys mentioned, and I'll throw one out there that you didn't. Marquise Lee. If this guy's healthy, I think he's an absolute weapon for Cam. I really think he's got a nice offense around him. I like that the rookie from last year too, N'Keal Harry. I think he could definitely step up and be a number one receiver, and sky's the limit, really.
And Rich, will pass it to you. Fantasy impact on the Patriots offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to be a solid QB2. He probably will be the first group of the QB2s. I would actually probably put him right above Ryan Tannehill now in rankings. But if you luck out and Cam Newton's the only one left, I mean, don't feel bad taking him as your quarterback one. He's going to get plenty of reps. He's going to light it up this year. So for sure, he's QB2 number one. But he's also a QB1 if you have to take him there.
And John, do you have any closing thoughts about the New England Patriots offense here?
Yeah, with Cam again, I think looking at him down at the goal line makes a huge difference. I mean, I think that's where he's going to separate himself from Brady. Like you said, Craig, he's a threat on the ground just as much as he is in the air. But I'll be curious to see how much on the ground they allow him to be. Is he going to be the old Cam, or is he going to be more of a pocket presence?
And that's what I think is really interesting about this situation. And we can maybe sit on this for a minute of a topic here. Is we haven't necessarily seen a ton of creativity from the Patriots offense over the last near 20 years in the Tom Brady era. They've been really good and they've played very effective football. They've done a trick play here or there, right? But they don't necessarily do anything crazy. They just play the game better than you do. And when you have a player like Cam who's so athletic, you can do a lot more things on offense than the average NFL team can do. And I just wonder how that's going to be this coming season with Belichick's offense. You know, with it's just a very interesting thing to figure out. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know if they're going to restrict him a little bit and want him to be more of a pure passer, or if they're going to get super creative and let the freak flag fly. Rich, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you got to let it fly. I mean, if they're really going to, pull off a Stidham and give him a couple more years to learn, I mean, what do you have to lose? Your team is still in win now mode. Bill Belichick is still alive and well. I think, it's going to be fun for the Patriots. Obviously, you wanted Brady to go out with a bang. You wanted to stay a little bit vanilla because you know that he's going to bring rings to your team. But, now's the time to have fun with it. I mean, they have all the people around them who are young and hungry. And then Julian Edelman, who is the ultimate receiver for Cam Newton. I'm going to say he's going to have over 1,000 yards this year. Let it happen. If it's an option play, like I said with James White, or have Cam run around until until he tells you he can't. He is a competitor. He's not going to just lay down and die. If you look at the videos now with him working out, he is working out harder than he has ever worked out before because he knows he's on a championship team. I would have fun with it. I would let it fly. There's still the team to beat in the AFC East, and everyone knows that. So it's going to be fun as they accumulate wins.
And now I'm going to mention something that I know for a fact will make both of you very angry, and it'll probably make our listening audience very angry. But I want to take you back in time to when Josh McDaniels was the head coach of the Denver Broncos and had a quarterback by the name of Timmy Tebow. And not saying Cam Newton and Tim Tebow are similar players, but Tim Tebow is probably the last athletic quarterback that Josh McDaniels has had the pleasure of coaching. And they were able to do some really creative things offensively. And that team made the playoffs in spite of Tim Tebow. Right? The defense was killer and all that stuff. But they were able to do a lot of really creative things. And I think that there's a possibility for McDaniels to kind of show his brilliance once again with having a quarterback like Cam Newton, where really the world is his oyster. So to that comparison, I'll throw it to John because I'm sure he's beat red right now at the thought of Tim Tebow being mentioned on a sports podcast in 2020. And what are your overall thoughts on this?
Yeah, not one of my favorite players, that's for sure. But I respect him as a man. I just thought as a football player, he should have moved to a different position and actually played. But anyway, I can see the comparison. I do. I'll tell you though, the thing I think we're overlooking a little bit. Cam Newton's got a chip on his shoulder and he's got something to prove, and so does Bill Belichick. How many conversations have we had over the years, and it's been, well, Belichick's never won without Brady. Well, Brady's never won without Belichick. Now they each have a chance to prove that. And I think Bill really wants to prove that for his legacy. And I think that's something that bothers him. I really do. So to me, I think that's probably the main reason he went out and grabbed Cam, because I do think they like the quarterback that they have there. I think they like Stidham, but you can't pass an opportunity to improve your team when Cam Newton's just sitting out there. You can't. So that's what I'm curious to see. Both of them chips on their shoulder with something to prove, and that could be a lethal combination.
So really the last bit of advice that we have in regards to Cam Newton is, John, I'll hand it to you. If you were to make a New England Patriots stack now, who are the players that you would feature on your FanDuel lineup, including Cam Newton?
Well, definitely Cam Newton. I'm going with Sony, and I'm going with Julian. I think those. I think that's the three right now. I could see Harry getting thrown in there, and in a sneakier play versus against the right team, I could see Marquise Lee again, as long as he's healthy.
And Rich, I'll pass it over to you. Same question from a daily perspective. What players from the Patriots do you think make the most sense to stack together?
I mean, for me, it's Cam without a doubt, and then instead of Sony, I'm going to put James White in there. I think he's going to get tons of receptions, like he normally does. I think with Cam Newton run all around in the backfield, Sony Michel might actually see less carries but have more production because it's going to be more free running for him. and then Julian Edelman. Julian Edelman for me, he's always a favorite. I have him on my fantasy teams every single year, and I'll even throw a fourth in there. I think if you put the New England Patriots defense in there too, last year their defense was off the charts. There's no reason to believe they're not going to be off the charts again. So if you want to do a sneaky four stack, I would add the Patriots defense to that as well.
That's a great
And
point,
Rich, I would kiss you if I could, if we were in different rooms. Because man, what a great transition. Let's talk about defense. Let's talk about how defense win fantasy championships. Uh, this is easily the most overlooked position in fantasy football. They are almost always your last pick or your second to last pick. And yet, I can't tell you how many times I've either won a fantasy league, won a big game, or have gotten the tar kicked out of me because I've been against the wrong defense or I've had the right defense. I think that this is something that fantasy players should start to consider, start to think about, and really have a strong idea of, the first quarter of the season, what these defenses matchups look like and who has the best ability to get you points. Because you'll play in some leagues. Rich and I played in the league together a few years ago where the defensive scoring was insanity. Like if you had a decent defense, you were getting 25 points from your defense. And I mean, it was ridiculous. So a good defense can go a long way in fantasy football. Depending on the league, it could go an extra long way. And in daily fantasy, we heard John's story last week. The Eagles defense won him the tournament that he was playing in. So it's an interesting thing to discuss. And I want to kind of kick it over to you guys. And we'll start with John. How much thought do you actually give to defense, and what's your strategy around them in both your regular fantasy football and your daily fantasy?
In regular fantasy, it really depends on the league. Like you said, like Rich and I are in a league together that defenses score a lot. As a matter of fact, we have one of the guys that has another one of the other teams. He absolutely hates that. He brings it up all the time. And I'm in a league where defenses are almost non-existent. We shouldn't even have them. But usually, if I'm drafting and it's a snake draft, I'm usually looking for the last couple spots. Last couple picks. I'm a guy in regular fantasy that I like to use my defenses as a matchup. So I may drop a defense 6 or 7 times during the year just to get that right matchup with on that right week. In daily fantasy, I'm going to tell you I pick my defense first. It's usually the cheapest of your positions. I like to lock that in first, and then I look to fill the rest of the way. On daily fantasy, I go defense, tight end. I used to do kicker, but they don't allow kickers anymore, which I hate. I like the kickers, and then I would fill my roster from there. So I think they're important. I do. Again, the tournament I won on FanDuel a few years ago for 40 grand, I had a defense that scored, I think it was 46 points. Without them, I not even close. So that's how important I think defenses are in daily.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. It's funny you mentioned kickers. My secret weapon for a lot of years was Matt Prater as my kicker from the Lions, because it seemed like the Lions couldn't score a touchdown, but they were getting like 7 field goals a game. I mean, Matt Prater was like fantasy gold because he was drilling it from 45 7 times. It was the best. So that is disappointing that there's no longer kickers in FanDuel, because you can find teams like that where you get a lot of points from your kicker. On the topic of defense, you mentioned you'll drop a defense 6 times in a season. For me, I am of the opinion that I don't need a backup quarterback when I play fantasy football. I think there's a lot of depth there, right? You can pick up a QB2 for a week, if you need it for your bye. I carry 2 defenses throughout the year. I will tend to draft someone who I feel will be the number 1 defense, and then I will kind of add and drop based on matchups throughout the season. It's a weird strategy. I don't see many other people do it, but it has worked for me in the past. And I think you can outthink yourself a little bit in that matchup game, but it has been helpful for me, and I recommend it to people because you can get a ton of value from these defenses, and it's usually overlooked. Rich, what are your thoughts about this whole defense wins fantasy championships?
I mean, sometimes they do. I mean, John, the league that John's talking about, for the last 2 years. And the first year that I was in the league, the defense scored more than most of the players on my team. So, I mean, in leagues like that where defense, every stat is counted, obviously you're going to take the defense a little sooner. Also, there's a lot of leagues that ad drops cost money. So you can't be dropping defenses 6 or 7 times. So you try to, take them, if not second to last pick, you want to take them third to last pick because you're going to have to be stuck with them for a little bit of time. Also, the whole thing, like you said, with the backup quarterback, I'm not afraid to take a defense before a backup quarterback if the backup quarterback is my second to last pick. If there's, a top 5 defense on there, or if there's a QB2 that I don't know if is ever going to see the field, I'm going to take the defense. And in daily fantasy, I'm the same way as John. I mean, the defense is very important for the week. Let's say the Patriots are playing the Dolphins. Obviously, that's going to be a one-sided affair, especially last year. Your defense is going to score a lot of points, and your team's going to be based off of that. So defense is very important. I like being in leagues where it doesn't cost money to ad drop because it's fun to look at the matchups every week and try to snipe defenses off the waiver wire, and then even do it 2 weeks ahead of time to block your opponents. So it's all about strategy, like fantasy across the board. But if you have a good defense, you keep that defense and you let it ride.
Yeah, and follow it while it's hot. I mean, that's the tricky part, right? But there'll be weeks in a row, right, where you'll see the same defense is scoring pick sixes, and then eventually it cools down a little bit, and that's where it comes down to the strategy, right? You have to kind of figure that out and do your own homework and try to see what is it about the matchups that has allowed this defense to get so hot. And it's not just pick sixes, right? It's sacks or points in fantasy leagues. Strip sacks, fumbles, all that kind of stuff, and it all adds up. So it's definitely something to consider when you're playing and how you're kind of developing your strategy. So what I look for in my fantasy defense is really a team that can get after the quarterback, someone with a proven pass rusher. These are the teams that are going to accumulate sacks, get pressures, and probably get interceptions. So at the time, the Texans were a great fantasy defense because of how J.J. Watt were just dominating the line of scrimmage and getting to the quarterback. The Rams 2 seasons ago, Aaron Donald was all over quarterbacks every single play. They were getting interceptions. These are the types of teams that I look for. Is that pretty much the same for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, last year I saw the Patriots defense in trade proposals, and they were getting high-level players because the defense was scoring a touchdown almost every single game, or it felt like that. So, obviously you want a pass rusher, you want the sacks, you want that easy 1 point. The pick sixes, that's the golden goose when that happens. But, it's fun to watch the games where it's not your team because you're rooting for your defense, which, if you need that 1 or 2 points, that could happen in a matter of 3 plays. So it makes fantasy very exciting and daily fantasy very exciting to have a defense that kills it, essentially.
And John, what about you? What do you look for in your fantasy defense?
Value, same as I do any other position, but I like a defense who's playing a turnover happy team and one with the ability to score on not only on defense but on special teams. You mentioned the Texans. I think and I play them a lot. As a matter of fact, I had them as my defense most of the time, almost in every league because of J.J. Watt. Because you're going to get 16 to 17 sacks out of him for the year. But again, I'm looking for the team that with the backup quarterback. I'm looking for that. Anytime the Bengals are playing in recent years. I mean, I want to play. I want to have the defenses playing against them. Or last year, the Dolphins. I like to pick and hunt and try to find the right spot. And like Rich said, if you're playing your regular fantasy, I try to pick that a week or two in advance if I can. So that's what I like to do with my defense.
And just one more thing that I think we forgot to mention: in a lot of leagues, special team return scores count for the defense. So if you have, let's say, the Kansas City Chiefs defense and Tyreek Hill takes it back for 100 yards, that makes the defensive wrinkles that more, they're exciting. So, I mean, it's based on your league, but sometimes I look for that. If there's a really good return man, I will target a team that will score touchdowns on the return game as well.
And I think this is all great food for thought, right? As we kind of inch closer and closer to the fantasy kickoff, right? I'm sure some drafts have happened already. Typically, they don't happen until a little later on in the summer. We'll probably do a live mock draft in the next couple of weeks here. Maybe in 2 weeks or so, we can do a live mock draft and kind of talk through some of the strategy as we're going along. If you guys would like to see that, be sure to reach out to us on Twitter, either at Daily Dynasty, at Seagors94, at Coda522, or at John Hazlett475. Or, of course, you can leave us one of those voicemails through Anchor FM, anchor.fm/Daily2Dynasty. So, guys, that's going to bring us to our last topic this evening. And that's going to be our 3 breakout players for 2020. We gave some sleepers last week. I think, and when I was putting together our doc, this was an interesting kind of concept to me because in my mind, there is a difference between sleepers and breakout players, right? A sleeper is somebody you can take very late and get some value for that's maybe, 2 rounds above where you could drafted them or 3 rounds above where you drafted them. That kind of value. A breakout player to me is somebody that that was a sleeper last year who is going to be a potential blue chip player this year that, this is probably your last chance to get them on the cheap in my mind, right? That's what breakout player to me means. That's what Lamar Jackson was heading into last season, right? That's what Patrick Mahomes was heading in, 2 seasons ago. So there's a bit of a difference here, and there some people say it's very similar, but I think these are some different guys named, and we'll take these all one player at a time. We'll name all 3 of our guys, and just kind of go around the horn. John, we'll kick it off with you. Who is your first breakout player for 2020?
First guy I'm going to give you is probably the weakest position in all of fantasy football, and it's tight end. I like Mike Gesicki. I think he started to show some signs last year, and I think this year with what's probably going to be a rookie quarterback eventually, I think you're going to see him take a large step. Even if Fitzpatrick is the starter there for a little while, him and Fitz had a really nice rapport going towards the end of last year, and I think that's going to continue. The guy's got the size, he's got the speed, and I think he's an absolute force in the red zone. And at a position in fantasy where we're starving for players, I think Mike Gesicki is going to be drafted this year a lot.
And we've seen some progression in his career so far, right? He had 5 touchdowns last year. He's a New Jersey guy, so all of us New Jersey guys gotta like that. I think there's a lot of value there, and I agree. He's poised to step up and have a big impact. Rich, who is your first breakout candidate?
My first breakout candidate is Teddy Two Gloves Bridgewater. I think he is going to, kill it this year with the Panthers. He has all the weapons that he could need. They're not all, number 1 receivers. I think DJ Moore is going to do a lot of things for him. Robbie Anderson is there as a long threat. And then, of course, Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey is probably the biggest reason why he's going to have crazy fantasy points because he's going to drop the ball off and Christian McCaffrey is going to do the rest. I think this is his, I'm not going to say last chance, but I think it might be his last chance. Coming back from a major injury, he showed what he could do with the Saints last year. He wants to keep this job at all costs, and I think he will. I think that he's going to be a really fun player for Matt Rule. And, again, with the drop-offs alone to Christian McCaffrey, he's definitely someone you might want to add as your QB2 or as a flyer in daily fantasy.
And Rich, I'm a big Teddy Bridgewater fan. I think he's done a great job of kind of working himself back to where he was as the starter in Minnesota. I think he has the potential to get there again in Carolina. And he was actually almost my breakout quarterback as well. But I ended up going with Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. he had a very impressive rookie year. I don't think anybody saw it coming from him. I was so impressed by his poise, his leadership, his athleticism. He was a much better thrower of the football than I thought he would be. And I just think the Cardinals got a lot better this offseason. They brought in DeAndre Hopkins. I like their draft. I mentioned Andy Isabella last week as a potential sleeper. I think this team is actually heading in the right direction. I think Coach Kingsbury, right, is putting together a good program. Surprisingly, a lot of things went right for the Cardinals last year when no one thought that they would, and I think he has the potential to break out and not quite be a Lamar Jackson this season, but I think have that kind of potential of having a decent rookie showing and then just breaking out the next season. I think he could be a quarterback that we talk about weekly. Coming up this season. So, John, we'll kick it back over to you. Your number 2 breakout player of the year.
My number 2 guy is going to be Paris Campbell from the Colts. I think given with Philip Rivers in that offense, I think it's going to get a little bit more vertical than it was last year. I like his speed. I like his size. I like his ability. And I think he's going to put up some points for you. Definitely, Paris Campbell's a guy I'm going to look to add mid to late in my regular drafts, my auction drafts. I'm going to spend a little bit of money on him, and I think he's a great candidate for a stack in daily fantasy as well.
And I think the Colts have been desperate for a quality wide receiver for a few seasons now. So they have T.Y. Hilton. If anyone was a former listener of Code Green, I am not a T.Y. Hilton fan. That is just a personal vendetta, as I was burned in a fantasy league after drafting him. But all that being said, I think the Colts are desperate for a quality wide receiver, and I think they're hoping Paris Campbell can be the guy. Rich, over to you, number 2 breakout player of the season.
Well, you mentioned the Cardinals and how much better they are this year, but I also want to say that David Johnson is going to be much better this year in his new home. A couple years ago, he was arguably the number 1 pick, or at least the number 3 pick in fantasy football drafts. Last year, he was the forgotten man with Kenyon Drake there, and new coach, new team. I think this year he's going to be back to the player that he once was. I hope that he avoids the injury bug, and I think he will. I think he's going to be explosive, and he is dropping in fantasy drafts, which to me, I'm going to scoop him as soon as humanly possible. I think he's going to have over 1,000 yards this year. I mean, that's a bold prediction for me, but that is my prediction. I think David Johnson's going to be back. He's going to, be active in the receiving game as well. But on the ground, I think he's going to have over 1,000 yards.
I'm a big David Johnson guy. I drafted him a few seasons ago as my number 1 overall pick. I think it might have been the season he got injured, but I'm a big fan of his game. He can do a little bit of everything, and I love him in Houston. I love him with Deshaun Watson. I think with that style of quarterback, they have the potential, like we were talking about before with Cam Newton and James White. The athleticism of Deshaun Watson makes what David Johnson does even more dangerous, and even scarier to opposing defenses. So I love that. He has broken out before, but I think he has the potential to break out once again. So I'll allow it as a breakout player for this season. My second breakout player is going to be John Ross of the Cincinnati Bengals. I was very quick to label this a bust when they drafted him. And he is still subject to injuries. He's still a smaller wide receiver, but he's blazing fast. He got in the end zone a lot his rookie year. Last year, he got more yards, but it's been a mess in Cincinnati. And, I think there are some very, very high hopes for the number 1 overall pick, Joe Burrow. I think this could be his go-to guy, John Ross, right? And they could develop a rapport, 2 young players, and do some creative things in their offense. I think John Ross's skill set, is something that can be helpful for a young quarterback. They can do some creative things, and I think he has the potential to really break out, come into his own in his 3rd season. John, back to you. Your 3rd breakout player of the year.
It's my homer pick, Sam Darnold. I think the second year with Adam Gase, who may not be everybody's favorite head coach, nor is he mine. I just think Sam's got some quietly. He's got some weapons around him. I love his the tight ends he's going to have. I love his wide receivers. I think they're on the come, so to speak, and I think Le'Veon will be a little bit better for him this year out of the backfield. So I think Sam's got the ability to put up some points, and I think the Jets have ability to put up points on offense. That might be the first time I've ever said that.
Definitely is. Definitely is.
The face I'm making right now, guys. You guys can't see me, but they're like, ooh.
I'm sure it's the same face I have.
Exactly. No, I like it. I'm rooting for it. I think the Jets have a lot of potential. They have a lot of potential every year, but Sam Darnold is going to be the key, right, to that team. And when he was not suffering from mono last year, he didn't. He wasn't bad. He was making the right steps and looking like the quarterback we thought he would be. Last year was disappointing. I think you have to hope that he will take a positive step forward and be the quarterback that we expected him to be. So I like it. I think this could be the season he breaks out as well. Rich, who is your final breakout candidate?
So my final breakout candidate, I guess you can also consider a sleeper, kind of in the same category as far as this one goes. So I know you talked before that, Antonio Brown would make a lot of sense to the Packers because they don't really have a clear-cut number 2 receiver. But for me, I think that's going to be Allen Lazard. Last year, he showed that he could support Aaron Rodgers when really no one else was available to do so. Everyone thought that Valdez-Scantling would be that guy, and Allen Lazard really stepped up more so than anyone else on that team. When Jimmy Graham became non-existent and it was Aaron Jones versus the world, I do believe that Allen Lazard definitely held his own. So for me, I think it's just going to be a matter of opportunity. I think he's going to have a lot of opportunity this year to show that he can be that number 2 guy. With Funchess there, it's going to cut maybe a little bit into his production, but I think it's going to, at the end of the day, he's going to be the number 2 wide receiver, and the number 2 wide receiver in Green Bay is definitely good for fantasy football points.
Absolutely. I think, that's going to be a name to watch out for. If you have Aaron Rodgers throwing you the football, you're bound to get into the end zone, right? Like any player on the Packers is somebody worth paying attention to for fantasy football when you have Aaron Rodgers throwing you the football. My last breakout player for the season is one who had a very productive season last year, so he might already be pretty high on some people's boards, but I really like Terry McLaurin from Washington. It's a real potential to break out. Last season, just under 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. But I think because of the team he's on, he probably doesn't get the attention you'd expect for some, a rookie with those kinds of numbers. He's 6 feet tall. He's 210 pounds. He's the number 1 option for a young quarterback in Dwayne Haskins on a team that isn't, particularly talented, but they have a couple of pieces where they can do some interesting things offensively. They're able to run the football, and this is going to be the guy who's going to get the targets. Sometimes defenses will figure a player out year 1 to year 2, but I like him to take a step forward. I think he gets over 1,000 yards. He might even get, another touchdown or 2. You might see that slip down to 5 or so, but I think he's going to kind of prove himself to be one of the better wide receivers in this league and a really good fantasy option. I think he's going to get a ton of targets. I think he's going to have some value in PPR leagues. He was getting, close to 10 targets a game last year. I think he will get more and more targets and have a lot of value, especially in PPR, on a team that, doesn't have a lot of extra talent. So when there's a guy who shows some, it's something to pay attention to as your wide receiver, 3 option or even a flex option in your fantasy leagues. Or if, you have a little bit of extra, a couple of dollars left in your FanDuel account and you're not sure who to spend it on, you have a wide receiver slot. Depending on the matchup, Terry McLaurin might be your guy. Do you guys have any closing thoughts about these breakout players?
I mean, I really hope that Alex Smith can come back. Obviously his injury was gruesome, but I would love Alex Smith to be the one throwing to Terry McLaurin. I know it's probably not going to happen, but Alex Smith, he's definitely someone that I'm rooting for.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, hard not to root for that guy, right? But I like the pick. I like McLaren too. I think in that offense, which really I think they're going to play like they have nothing to lose a little bit this year, because really they don't. I think that's a really nice pick.
Well, thanks, fellas. I like when you guys like my picks. It makes me feel a little bit better about my football knowledge when we're all in agreement. And speaking of Alex Smith, I haven't gotten the chance to watch it yet, but they did the E60 on his comeback story a few months ago, and I've been meaning to watch it. It's sitting on my DVR. So just throwing that out there. If you, I should watch it. Did you guys get the chance to watch it
Yeah,
yet?
it was great. It was really. It shows his entire journey. With his wife by his side the entire time. It shows how bad the injury actually was. It was to the bone. It was. He could have died, and his rehab has been top notch. And I think he's going to play again. It's going to be like a Teddy Bridgewater situation again. I think he's going to have to prove himself, but I think he plays again.
And he's such a resilient player. Former number one overall pick, right? He was labeled a bust. He made the comeback like late in his career. He gets replaced by Colin Kaepernick. He goes to Kansas City, takes them to the playoffs year after year, gets replaced by Patrick Mahomes. I mean, this guy's just so resilient. You want it to work out for him so bad. I think he's one of the better guys in the NFL. Maybe not the best talent in the world, but a great person, and I think deserves a shot to kind of close out his career the right way. John, any nice words for Alex Smith and his recovery?
Yeah, again, I haven't seen the video. I haven't seen the footage either. I'm waiting. That's on my DVR as well. So actually, maybe I'll go watch it. Maybe I'll go watch it tonight.
I was going to say, it might be time to crack open a beer and check out an E60 tonight.
Might be bourbon for me, but yeah, that might be a good idea. But yeah, listen, Alex Smith's, he's a top-notch guy. He's one of those character guys. What stands out to me, two things. One, he was drafted over Aaron Rodgers, which I think is, going back, I think that's pretty cool. Number two is when he was in Kansas City and they did take Mahomes and they had success with Alex Smith. And Alex Smith says, "Hey, there's a kid behind here that he's the future." Like he was very cool about that. And in a world where, and I say it to Rich all the time, players don't care about being, the stepping stone for the other guy. They don't care about helping out the other player. In this specific case, Alex Smith is the opposite. He clearly did help. And if you ask Patrick Mahomes, he'll be the first one to tell you that he did. So Alex Smith's a class act. Anytime you get a guy like that on your team and on the field, I'm going to root for him.
So here's hoping for a nice speedy recovery for Alex Smith. So guys, that's the show today. That's all the analysis. We had a lot of fun talking tonight about whether it's the NFL updates, Cam Newton in New England, defenses in fantasy football, or our breakout candidates. We had a ton of fun doing it, and we'd love to hear from you either on social media. You can reach out to us on Twitter at Daily to Dynasty, at Ccorps94, at Coda522, or at John Hazlett 475 via social media, right on Twitter. Or again, you can leave us a voicemail. We will play those in a future show. Anchor.fm/Daily to Dynasty. You can access that on your phone or on your computer and leave us a voicemail. We'll put that into our next program. If you're listening to this thing on podcast through Anchor FM or one of our other service providers, whether that's Spotify, Pocket Cast, or Radio Public, should be on iTunes pretty shortly. Thank you for doing so. Please leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review. It helps the show out immensely, and we will shout you out on a future podcast or show. If you're watching this thing on YouTube, again, we want to thank you for doing so. Please like and subscribe to the channel. We will be putting out some kind of short form content during the week as well on YouTube that will be of value, especially in the middle of the season when you guys are on the waiver wire. We'll be kind of putting that out in the middle of the week as a short snackable video for you guys. So definitely you want to subscribe to this channel so that you can get those updates all season long. And we want to give a special shout out to our brand new partners, the Underdog newsletter. We just spent that whole time, right, talking about Alex Smith and Underdog stories. If you're a fan of Underdog stories, you have to subscribe to the Underdog newsletter. Every week, they sift through hundreds of articles, videos, and podcast interviews. And then on Tuesday morning, they send out a nice bite-sized rundown of only the best stories you can find all in one place. You can subscribe to the newsletter at jokermag.com/newsletter, and we'll put that URL somewhere down here below and in the description so that you can just click it. But that's jokermag.com/newsletter, and follow them on Twitter at jokermaghq. All right, guys, that's all the time we have for this show. Thank you again so much for watching or listening. For Rich and John, I want to say thank you so much again. That's it for this week. We'll talk to you next.